It started with a whisper, just a hint of fear that rippled through the marble halls of Buckingham Palace, a quiet panic that no public statement could fully mask. Sources close to the royal family are now revealing that Prince William's health is far worse than the palace has ever admitted, and that he has taken the unprecedented step of personally requesting a private meeting with Prince Harry, alone. For the first time in years, the estranged brothers may finally confront each other, face to face, in a moment that could very well be their last. Imagine the tension in that room. The weight of decades of rivalry, resentment, and unspoken grievances hanging in the air. Two men who shared the innocence of childhood, the burdens of royal duty, and the fame and scrutiny of the world, now brought together by a force more powerful than public appearances or palace protocol: mortality. You can almost hear the collective intake of breath. What would they say? Could forgiveness be found? Or would the shadows of the past swallow them whole? Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. Prince William's diagnosis is being kept deliberately vague to the public, with official statements portraying him as simply undergoing routine treatment or maintaining his usual engagements. But insiders insist that the truth is far more severe. There are whispers of a condition that could escalate quickly, a situation that has left the palace staff and family members deeply shaken. The stakes could not be higher, and the implications go beyond the personal. The future of the monarchy, the royal image, and the legacy of the two princes themselves are all at risk. And now he wants to see Harry, not with other family members present, not with advisors or media handlers. Alone. It's a private moment that no one has ever seen before. A moment charged with fear, regret, hope, and the possibility of irreversible change. The palace corridors, usually filled with rehearsed decorum and ritual, have transformed into a theater of raw human emotion. One can only imagine the silent prayers whispered behind closed doors, the furtive glances exchanged by staff, the anticipation of what this encounter might unleash. For the public, the story is shocking enough. The heir to the throne, privately confronting his brother after years of tension, spurred on by a grave health crisis. But for those who know the palace well, this is unprecedented. Never before have the brothers been summoned together under such circumstances, and never before has the world been so tantalizingly close to the private truth of their relationship. And yet, despite the secrecy, fragments of information have leaked: a handwritten note, a hushed phone call, a whispered plea from William himself to Harry. The anticipation is unbearable. What did the note say? What words did William choose, knowing how delicate the situation was? And how would Harry respond, after years of distance and estrangement? Let's take a step back and consider how they got here. These are two men who were inseparable as children, whose bond was forged through loss, duty, and privilege. They grew up with cameras following their every move, with the expectations of a nation weighing heavily on their shoulders. They laughed, fought, and confided in each other in ways that no one outside their family could ever understand. But as adulthood approached, cracks began to form. The pressures of public life, the divergent paths they chose, and the influence of advisors and partners slowly drove a wedge between them. Over time, the world began to see the strain, the subtle snubs, the cold statements, and pointed interviews. Yet, beneath it all, there remained a connection that could never be fully severed, a bond that might now be tested as never before. This is not merely a reunion. It is a reckoning. Prince Harry, having navigated his own turbulent journey, away from the royal fold and into a world of independence and celebrity, now faces a moment he may have feared but also longed for. What would he say? How much would he reveal about his own struggles, his sense of betrayal, his regrets, his longing for family? And what about William? Behind this stoic public face, what vulnerabilities lie hidden? What confessions, fears, or pleas might he share in the privacy of this encounter? Sources indicate that the palace has been bracing for this meeting for days. Security has been heightened, staff have been instructed to maintain the strictest discretion, and even routine engagements have been shuffled to ensure the brothers can meet in absolute privacy. Imagine the hush of the palace wing, the quiet shuffle of shoes on marble, the barely perceptible creak of doors opening and closing as aides prepare for a moment of monumental significance. Every detail, every precaution, has been meticulously calculated. And yet, human emotion cannot be controlled. What happens when two men, bound by blood but divided by years of misunderstandings, finally face each other under the shadow of mortality? The emotional stakes are staggering. If reconciliation occurs, it will be a triumph not only of family, but of human resilience, forgiveness, and love. If not, it could mark a permanent fracture, a sorrow that history will remember as the final undoing of a once unbreakable bond. The world watches, the press speculates, and the royal inner circle holds its collective breath. But what comes next will not only affect the brothers themselves, it will ripple through the palace, the monarchy, and the public consciousness. And then there is the timing. Why now? Why, at this particular moment, has William reached out? Is it desperation, fear, clarity that only comes in the face of mortality? Or is there something more pressing, a revelation, a secret that he cannot face alone? The sources remain tight-lipped, but the implications are chilling. This could be their last chance for honesty, for reconciliation, for closure. One has to wonder, are they ready to face the past, to confront their mistakes, to lay down years of resentment and pain in a single, emotionally charged conversation? The world has witnessed the public displays of tension, the interviews, the carefully worded statements, the rare joint appearances. But nothing captures the depth of this moment. No photograph, no headline, no soundbite can truly convey the emotional gravity of two brothers sitting together, isolated from the world, sharing a moment that might never be repeated. The question lingers. What would you say if this were your last chance to speak to a loved one after years of distance? Would you hold back, or would you finally risk everything for honesty, for connection, for closure? Sources reveal that even the palace staff are divided in their expectations. Some hope for reconciliation, believing that family bonds, once so deep, can withstand even years of estrangement. Others fear disaster, convinced that old wounds will reopen, that words spoken in anger or sorrow could create a fracture that even time cannot heal. And in the midst of this tension, Prince Harry must navigate not only his own emotions, but the weight of expectation from his family, from the public, from himself. And then there are the secrets. What has been left unspoken all these years? What regrets, what truths, what confessions will finally surface? Insiders hint at private messages, unshared conversations, and moments of vulnerability that the world has never seen. The curiosity gap is immense. What are these brothers hiding from the world, and perhaps even from themselves? And when Harry finally enters the room, what will he discover? Will it be an emotional reunion, or a moment that changes everything in ways no one anticipates? This introduction is just the beginning. The conversation between Prince Harry and Prince William, fueled by fear, regret, and hope, is poised to unravel secrets that could shock the world. Every gesture, every word, every pause carries meaning. Every silence speaks volumes. And as they confront the past and the present, we are left on the edge of our seats, waiting to see what will unfold. But one thing is certain, the world will never see this story the same way again. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. It began quietly, almost imperceptibly. A doctor's note here, a hurried consultation there, whispers among palace aides that something was seriously wrong. But the public saw only the polished veneer. Prince William attending engagements, smiling for the cameras, performing his duties with that familiar combination of calm authority and royal composure. To the outside world, everything appeared normal. Yet inside Buckingham and Kensington, the story was far grimmer. Sources now confirm that Prince William's diagnosis is far more serious than the palace has ever allowed to be reported. While official statements hinted at minor health concerns or routine treatment, insiders paint a darker picture, one that has left staff, family members, and even the closest advisors shaken. There are suggestions of a condition that could rapidly escalate, with implications not just for William's health, but for the very continuity of the monarchy. What kind of health issue drives a man of his stature, his duty, to reach out privately to his brother after years of distance? Imagine the weight of that moment. William, heir to the throne, the face of stability for a nation, sitting alone with the knowledge that his health may be deteriorating far faster than anyone publicly realizes. How does a man reconcile duty with vulnerability? How does he confront the fears he has long suppressed while maintaining the stoic composure expected of him? These questions have haunted the palace corridors, whispered in private conversations, and now thrust into the heart of one of the most consequential royal stories of the decade. And then comes the extraordinary revelation. William has asked to see Harry alone. Not in a public room, not flanked by advisors, not mediated by lawyers or staff. Alone. For insiders, this is unprecedented. The last decade has been filled with careful distance, miscommunication, and carefully choreographed appearances designed to maintain a sense of control and decorum. The idea of these two men, brothers bound by blood yet divided by years of misunderstanding and public conflict, meeting in complete privacy, is shocking. It is intimate. It is dangerous. And it is electrifying. But why now? Why reach out at this exact moment? Some insiders speculate that the diagnosis has forced William to confront mortality in a way that public duties never could. There is a clarity that comes when time feels short, a sudden, undeniable urgency to repair fractured bonds before it's too late. For Harry, who has spent years navigating his own path, from royal life to Hollywood fame, public scrutiny, and the struggle for independence, the invitation carries profound weight. It is both a lifeline and a gauntlet. The question hangs in the air. Can decades of estrangement and resentment be bridged in a single meeting? The diagnosis itself remains shrouded in secrecy. Official channels continue to downplay the severity, using phrases like routine monitoring or minor concern to reassure the public. But insiders insist that the truth is more alarming, a condition that could compromise William's ability to perform his duties and challenge the physical and emotional endurance of the heir apparent. Some speculate it is an illness that requires discreet, ongoing treatment. Others suggest complications that might become critical without warning. What is known is that the private acknowledgement of this crisis has prompted action that few could have predicted, a personal summons for Harry. For those following the royal family, the tension is palpable. Every movement is scrutinized, every public appearance analyzed for hidden signs of illness or distress. But the private reality, the heart-pounding, unseen reality, is far more intense. Staff members report a level of urgency and secrecy unlike anything they've encountered before. Couriers move quietly with confidential messages. Aides are instructed to maintain absolute discretion. Even the usual routines of palace life have been disrupted, with meetings rescheduled, engagements shuffled, and security tightened to allow for this pivotal encounter. Now, consider Harry's perspective. For years, he has been estranged from his brother, navigating a turbulent relationship marked by misunderstandings, public statements, and personal grievances. Yet despite the distance, the bonds of family are not so easily severed. The call to meet alone carries enormous emotional weight. What does he feel as he boards the plane, knowing he will be walking into a room charged with decades of emotion, history, and unspoken words? Is there fear, relief, anticipation? Perhaps all three. And one has to wonder, what will he say first? Will he apologize? Will he demand answers? Will he finally lay bare the hurt and the longing that have defined so much of the past decade? Insiders suggest that William himself is acutely aware of the magnitude of this moment. Reports describe him as calm, measured, yet unmistakably vulnerable in private. The same man who, in public, embodies duty, composure, and confidence, is said to have spent hours crafting a message, verbal, written, and emotional, designed to bridge a gap he knows has grown painfully wide. There is no room for misstep. Every word, every gesture, every pause carries the potential to heal or to hurt, to reconcile or to deepen the rift. And what about the broader palace environment? Staff members are caught in a delicate balance. They must facilitate the meeting, respect the privacy of both princes, and anticipate potential outcomes without interfering. Sources reveal that some aides fear emotional explosions. Others hope for reconciliation. Even minor details, which room, which hour, which door, have been planned meticulously. This is not simply a visit. It is a high-stakes negotiation of emotion, history, and family legacy. At the heart of this story lies an emotional paradox. The very distance that has caused pain and misunderstanding also makes the potential for reunion all the more profound. What are the chances of two brothers, each carrying years of private and public burdens, finally finding common ground. What are the risks of confrontation, of memories reopening, of grievances resurfacing? Every insider consulted for this story emphasizes that the outcome is anything but predictable. And it is this unpredictability that gives the narrative its tension, its drama, and its magnetic pull. As the world watches, the stakes extend beyond family dynamics. The monarchy itself is implicated. Prince William's health directly affects succession plans, public confidence, and the symbolic continuity of an institution steeped in centuries of tradition. A confrontation or reconciliation between the brothers will inevitably ripple outward, affecting staff, advisors, and potentially even global perception of the royal family. This is not simply a personal moment. It is a historic intersection of family, duty, and destiny. What makes this story irresistible, however, is the human element. Beneath the pageantry, the protocol, and the media spin, this is a tale of two men grappling with mortality, love, regret, and loyalty. For all the opulence and privilege, the pressure and scrutiny, the raw human emotions are universal. Fear, hope, longing, and the need for connection. It is these emotional beats that will grip viewers, that will make them lean in, that will keep hearts racing as the story unfolds. And then there is the cliffhanger, the moment that no one could anticipate. Sources hint that when Harry finally enters the room, the first words exchanged are not apologies, not explanations, but a revelation that changes everything. Something that reframes the entire context of their estrangement and the urgency of the meeting. The details remain closely guarded, but insiders suggest that even the palace aides were caught off guard by the intensity of the moment. It is the kind of revelation that will leave viewers questioning everything they thought they knew about the brothers, their relationship, and the private life of the royal family. So what does this mean for Harry? For William? For the monarchy? And for the millions of people watching from around the world, desperate to understand what is really happening behind palace doors? This is a story that is not just about royal drama. It is about love, mortality, and the raw power of human connection. It is about a brother reaching out in his time of need, about the possibility of forgiveness, and about a moment that could very well define the legacy of two of the most famous men in the world. The stage is set. The players are ready. The stakes have never been higher. And as we follow the story from this shocking diagnosis to the private meeting that could change everything, one question remains. What will happen when the brothers finally speak, alone, with nothing to shield them from truth or emotion? But what comes next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. The tension between Prince Harry and Prince William didn't appear overnight. It was slow, insidious, creeping into years of shared history, turning memories of laughter into bitter reminders of misunderstandings and rivalries. To the outside world, they were the picture of royal unity, brothers, heirs, sons of Diana and Charles, carrying on the weight of a monarchy under the constant glare of global attention. But behind the carefully curated images, behind the stiff smiles at public engagements, a storm had been brewing for years, a storm fueled by differences in personality, life choices, and perception of duty. To truly understand the gravity of this private reunion, one must go back decades. William and Harry were once inseparable. They shared the excitement of childhood adventures, whispered secrets in the corridors of Kensington Palace, and clung to each other in the wake of the most public loss any child could endure, the death of their mother, Princess Diana. That tragedy forged an unspoken bond, a sense of mutual reliance that both brothers leaned on for years. In those early days, Harry was the impulsive, mischievous younger brother, always testing boundaries, while William carried a sense of responsibility, a seriousness beyond his years. Their differences complemented each other. Where one faltered, the other steadied. But as they grew older, cracks began to form. Public life weighed heavily on both. William, ever conscious of his place in the line of succession, bore the burden of expectation. He became disciplined, meticulous, and cautious, aware that every action was scrutinized. Harry, on the other hand, rebelled against the strictures of royal duty. He sought independence, carving a path that often diverged sharply from William's measured approach. Each decision, each public statement, Each media interview became a small fissure in the foundation of their relationship. Over time, these fissures widened. Observers noted subtle changes: curt responses in interviews, avoidance at public events, cryptic social media comments that hinted at unresolved tension. Family gatherings, once warm and lively, became arenas of silent judgment and unspoken resentment. Harry's move to California, his pursuit of independence, and his outspoken critiques of palace life created a narrative that William could neither ignore nor fully condone. The palace insiders describe a growing divide, one that left staff walking on eggshells, unsure which brother's emotional state would dominate the room. But the divide wasn't solely public. Sources indicate that private disputes, arguments about royal duties, disagreements over public appearances, and conflicting advice from counselors deepened the emotional rift. One aide recounted a tense exchange at a charity gala years ago, where the brothers barely spoke to each other, exchanging polite nods but avoiding any semblance of conversation. Another source mentioned a text message that went unanswered for weeks, a small gesture that snowballed into months of unspoken hurt. These incidents, seemingly minor to outsiders, compounded over time, creating a distance that neither brother could easily bridge. And yet, despite all of this, the bond remained. The same sources emphasize that beneath the friction and resentment, there is still a deep, abiding connection. They are, after all, brothers. Shared blood, shared loss, and shared upbringing cannot be erased, no matter how long the estrangement lasts. This is why the invitation from William to Harry carries such extraordinary weight. It is not simply a call for a meeting. It is a call to confront a decade of unresolved emotions, misunderstandings, and grievances. It is a moment that could either heal or further fracture the relationship. Emotional tension runs high in these accounts. Those close to the family describe Harry's inner conflict: the desire to reconnect and the fear of vulnerability, the longing for reconciliation and the hesitation to expose old wounds. Imagine stepping into a room after years of estrangement, knowing that the first word spoken could either soothe years of pain or ignite it further. For Harry, the stakes are personal, emotional, and public all at once. William's perspective is no less complex. To the public, he is the embodiment of duty and stability, but privately, he faces the fear of his own mortality, the pressure of royal expectations, and the weight of unresolved conflict with the brother he once considered his closest confidant. Insiders reveal that William has spent hours preparing for this moment, rehearsing words, considering tone, and contemplating the best approach to reach Harry without causing further harm. It is a delicate balancing act, one that highlights both the gravity of the diagnosis and the emotional peril of the reunion. What makes this story gripping is not just the emotional tension between the brothers, but the human contradictions at play. William, stoic and disciplined, is vulnerable. Harry, impulsive and outspoken, is cautious. Both carry regret, both seek connection, and both fear rejection. It is a paradox that magnifies every word, every gesture, every pause in their impending encounter. The palace, usually a fortress of protocol, suddenly feels fragile, as if the walls themselves are holding their collective breath in anticipation of what is to come. Then there is the broader context. The public has watched their relationship evolve in real time for years. Every interview, every headline, every social media post has been scrutinized, analyzed, and dissected. People have formed opinions about who is at fault, who is the good brother, who is the troubled one. Yet the truth, insiders insist, is far more nuanced. The rift is not the product of villainy or malice, but of human emotion, circumstance, and the crushing weight of duty and expectation. Understanding this complexity is crucial to grasping the significance of their private meeting. And now, after years of distance, the opportunity for confrontation, for honesty, for apology, for revelation, has arrived. Sources hint at the delicate choreography behind this meeting: the selection of a private room, the timing of the engagement, the presence or absence of staff, the communication of intentions beforehand. Every detail has been meticulously considered because the emotional stakes could not be higher. The atmosphere is charged with anticipation, with the possibility of reconciliation hanging in the balance like a fragile glass ornament. As we prepare to explore the unfolding drama, consider this. What would you do if you had been estranged from someone you love, someone you once confided in, and suddenly they reached out at a time of crisis? Would you rush to meet them, fearful of missing a final chance? Or would hesitation take over, leaving words unspoken and regrets unresolved? This is precisely the dilemma Harry faces, magnified by the global spotlight, by the weight of legacy, and by the fragility of his brother's health. The first moments of any meeting are often the most revealing. Observers speculate that Harry's arrival will be met with a complex mix of relief, apprehension, and raw emotion. There may be awkward silence, a handshake, a hesitant smile, or perhaps a sudden break in composure. William, too, may struggle with vulnerability, balancing the need for honesty with the desire to protect both himself and his brother from pain. The emotional stakes are immense. Every breath, every pause, every glance carries meaning. And then, the cliffhanger. Sources suggest that the very first words spoken in this reunion may alter everything we think we know about the brothers. A revelation, a confession, or a plea may surface that forces Harry to reconsider not only his relationship with William, but the trajectory of his own life. The atmosphere is electric, the potential for heartbreak and healing equally possible. For those watching, it is a rare, unprecedented window into the private lives of men whose every public move is scrutinized, whose every emotion has been long hidden behind carefully cultivated composure. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. The public sees the monarchy as a monolith of composure, stability, and grace. Every speech, every appearance, every statement is carefully curated, polished, and delivered with a precision that few outside the palace can comprehend. Yet behind that facade, the reality is far messier, far more human, and far more fraught with tension than any public broadcast could ever convey. The palace speaks, but often, it doesn't tell the truth. Official statements are crafted to reassure, to maintain the image of calm continuity, to quell the swirling rumors that inevitably follow any royal crisis. In the case of Prince William's diagnosis, the palace has insisted that he is resting comfortably, undergoing routine treatment, and continuing his public duties. On paper, it sounds ordinary, almost mundane, but insiders say these statements are deliberately misleading. The reality, they claim, is far more serious, far more urgent, and far more personal than the public could possibly imagine. Consider the paradox. The very institution tasked with preserving transparency in moments of national significance has perfected the art of omission. Every word is chosen, every detail vetted, every fact filtered to convey reassurance. Yet the gaps in communication are just as telling as the statements themselves. For weeks, palace officials have been carefully managing media narratives, planting stories of William's continued resilience, of his participation in charitable events, of his unwavering commitment to royal duty. But behind closed doors, the atmosphere is far different. Tension, fear, and anticipation run high, fueled by knowledge of the private severity of his condition. Staff members have described these days as some of the most tense in recent memory. Security protocols have been heightened, but not in ways the public would notice. Couriers carrying confidential medical documents move silently through restricted corridors. Advisors, usually focused on ceremonial duties, are now consumed with logistics, ensuring that Harry's upcoming private visit is executed flawlessly. Even minor missteps, an overheard conversation, a delayed message, a misinterpreted gesture, could have cascading effects. Every detail matters because what is at stake is far greater than routine palace matters. It is the fragile reconciliation of two brothers, set against a backdrop of life-altering news. And yet, the contrast between public and private perception creates an almost surreal dynamic. To the world, William appears the picture of health and vigor. He attends engagements, smiles for the cameras, and performs his duties with the calm authority expected of a future king. Observers note the familiar grace, the practiced composure, and the unflappable demeanor. But those closest to him know the truth. There are moments of pain, moments of exhaustion, moments when even the strongest resolve is tested. Staff report whispered consultations with medical advisors, subtle cues in his body language, and fleeting moments of vulnerability that never reach the public eye. It is this dual reality, the public performance versus the private truth, that makes the forthcoming meeting with Harry so fraught with potential. The palace has a vested interest in maintaining appearances, but the brothers' private encounter cannot be fully controlled. No statement can dictate their emotions, no protocol can dictate their words, and no public image can shield them from the raw human tension that will inevitably surface. Observers suggest that this is why William insisted on meeting Harry alone. It is the only space where honesty, emotion, and truth can exist without interference. The palace has long been criticized for its handling of sensitive matters, particularly those involving personal health, mental well-being, and familial conflict. Critics argue that the monarchy often prioritizes image over truth, protection over transparency, and discretion over disclosure. This has created a culture in which insiders often speak in whispers, documents are tightly guarded, and the media receives carefully crafted narratives rather than full disclosure. In this case, the strategy is clear: assure the public, maintain continuity, and minimize alarm, while privately grappling with a crisis that is anything but ordinary. Interestingly, the palace's official communications have created a ripple effect. The public, accustomed to a certain level of transparency and guided by decades of media coverage, has begun to speculate wildly. Headlines vary from Prince William in perfect health to royal concerns over Prince William's condition, with each iteration feeding curiosity and speculation. The reality, however, is far more controlled than the frenzy suggests. Palace insiders report that only a handful of staff truly understand the severity of William's situation, and even fewer have any idea of the private dynamics between him and Harry. Humor, irony, and contradictions abound in this environment. Consider this: a prince, publicly portraying health and stability, privately navigating an urgent medical issue; a palace staff, trained in discretion, secretly whispering in corridors. And a world, oblivious, consuming carefully curated images of strength and composure. The contrast between the spectacle and the reality is almost cinematic, a tension that fuels both curiosity and suspense. It is precisely this tension that makes the upcoming meeting between the brothers so compelling. The truth cannot be contained in public statements. It can only emerge in the intimate, unobserved space where Harry and William will confront each other. Even within the palace walls, opinions diverge. Some aides believe that full disclosure to the public would be catastrophic, potentially undermining confidence in the monarchy and destabilizing public perception. Others argue that withholding information is not only dishonest, but also emotionally harmful, creating an environment where rumors flourish and speculation runs rampant. This tension between image and reality mirrors the broader conflict between the brothers, one focused on duty and perception, the other on independence and honesty. Then there is the timing. Why release these statements now? Why carefully manage the narrative while privately arranging a meeting with Harry? Insiders suggest that William's condition, combined with the awareness of time's fragility, has created a rare window for personal confrontation. The palace cannot control this window entirely. It can manage logistics, provide security, and orchestrate timing, but it cannot dictate the emotions, revelations, or confessions that will inevitably surface when the brothers are alone. This is what makes the situation unprecedented. A private meeting with potential global implications, occurring under the strictest secrecy, yet framed by the carefully curated narrative of the palace. The public may never know the details of these moments. Cameras cannot capture subtle gestures. Microphones cannot pick up whispered confessions, and statements cannot convey the full weight of decades of tension. But insiders insist that every second will be loaded with meaning: a glance, a pause, a sigh, a tremor in the voice, all signaling the emotional undercurrent that public observers will never see. It is a reminder that the monarchy, for all its traditions and public displays, is also profoundly human, vulnerable, and capable of the same complex emotions as any family. And yet, the secrecy only heightens curiosity. Every statement released by the palace becomes a clue, a puzzle piece, a hint at what is really happening. Observers analyze phrasing, tone, and timing, looking for signs of truth hidden beneath layers of diplomacy and PR. The world wants to know, how serious is William's diagnosis? How urgent is the meeting with Harry? What emotions will surface when the brothers finally confront each other? The contrast between public reassurance and private reality creates a narrative tension that is irresistible. Finally, there is the looming cliffhanger. Sources suggest that the first words exchanged in the meeting could expose truths that even the palace could not anticipate. A confession, a revelation, or a plea may surface that challenges everything the public believes about the brothers' estrangement, about William's health, and about the royal family itself. The stage is set for drama, for reconciliation, or for heartbreak, and it will happen in a room far removed from cameras, statements, and carefully orchestrated appearances. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. It began before the plane even touched the tarmac. Long before Harry would step foot into the palace corridors, long before the familiar sound of guards' boots echoed against marble floors, he was already on a journey, not just across continents, but into the depths of memory, guilt, and anticipation. This was not merely a flight from Los Angeles to London. It was a pilgrimage, a return to a past he had avoided for years, a confrontation with the brother he had both loved and feared. Sources reveal that Harry did not travel lightly. He carried more than a suitcase filled with clothes and personal items. He carried the weight of a decade of estrangement, unspoken grievances, and public scrutiny. Every mile closer to England amplified the tension. Every hour brought him nearer to a conversation that could redefine his relationship with William and alter the trajectory of both their lives. How do you prepare for such a meeting? How do you condense years of hurt, pride, and longing into a single encounter? These are questions Harry has surely asked himself countless times, and yet answers remained elusive. Observers describe Harry's journey as a study in contrasts. On the one hand, he is a man accustomed to the limelight, comfortable with public attention, and well-versed in managing both his image and his emotions. On the other hand, this journey is intensely private, intensely personal. No cameras, no interviews, no curated headlines, just a brother, a diagnosis, and the uncharted territory of human emotion. There is a vulnerability here, a rare moment where the public persona gives way to the private human being, stripped of ego, titles, and expectation. The journey was not without reflection. Sources indicate that Harry spent long hours in transit reviewing the past, the laughter of childhood, the whispers shared late at night, the unspoken support that had once defined their bond. He revisited painful memories too, the arguments, the miscommunications, the moments when pride and stubbornness prevented reconciliation. In the quiet of his private jet, he weighed his emotions, wondering how William would receive him. Would the invitation be a genuine plea for connection, or a test of loyalty and love? Could they bridge the gap, or would years of distance prove too vast to cross in a single conversation? Even the logistics of the journey were designed to shield him from distraction and intrusion. Security personnel coordinated meticulously with palace aides, ensuring that Harry could arrive with minimal exposure, minimal risk, and maximal privacy. No paparazzi, no public fanfare, no media leaks, just a direct path to a meeting that would demand every ounce of his focus, every fragment of his courage. It is rare, insiders say, for Harry to experience a moment where every variable is under control except the one that matters most, the emotional truth of facing his brother. And then there is the internal conflict. For all Harry's public displays of confidence and independence, the journey back to William is fraught with fear. Fear of rejection, fear of anger, fear of failure. It is a paradoxical tension. He is drawn toward reconciliation, yet wary of the emotional exposure it requires. He knows that the first word spoken could set the tone for everything that follows. Will he speak cautiously, carefully weighing each sentence? Or will he speak from the heart, risking vulnerability in a way he has avoided for years? The answer is uncertain, and it is this uncertainty that intensifies the drama of the journey. Alongside fear, there is hope. Sources indicate that Harry clings to the possibility of reconnection, to the hope that the bond forged in childhood can withstand the pressures of adulthood, fame, and distance. He remembers moments of laughter with William, shared adventures that felt timeless, and the unspoken loyalty that had once defined their relationship. These memories act as a compass, guiding him toward the meeting, reminding him that beneath years of estrangement lies a bond that is not easily broken. But the journey is not solely introspective. There are external pressures as well. Advisors, family aides, and close confidants all weigh in, offering guidance, caution, and warnings. Every detail is scrutinized. Which route to take, how to handle arrival, what tone to adopt. It is a delicate balance, navigating both the private emotional landscape and the public expectation that accompanies any royal engagement. And yet, the meeting is deliberately kept private, shielded from public eyes, because only in this private space can the truth emerge without distortion. As the plane descended into England, the tension was almost tangible. Sources describe Harry as pensive, quiet, and unusually focused. The familiar skyline, the sprawling palaces, the echoes of history, all of it seemed to converge in anticipation of what was about to unfold. He was not merely returning to a location. He was returning to a crucible of emotion, a test of family, loyalty, and forgiveness. Every passing landmark, every mile closer, intensified the stakes, and every thought revolved around the question, what will William say first? Inside Kensington, preparations mirrored Harry's journey in their meticulous attention to detail. The palace staff ensured that the room was private, that there would be no interruptions, and that the atmosphere would allow for an honest, unguarded exchange. The contrast is stark. Outside, the world sees pageantry and tradition. Inside, raw human emotion waits quietly, ready to unfold. The room is a stage, but the actors are stripped of artifice. There is no protocol that can dictate emotion, no ceremonial rule that can shape confession, no headline that can encapsulate the truth. And yet, even as the journey progresses, the emotional undercurrent is visible to those close to Harry. Sources note subtle signs of anxiety, the way he fidgets with a cufflink, the way he replays words in his mind, the quiet moments of reflection punctuated by long stares out the window. These small gestures, insignificant to the casual observer, reveal the intensity of the emotional journey, the burden of expectation, and the weight of a meeting that could change everything. Every moment of the flight brings him closer not just to William, but to a confrontation with himself. What does he want from this encounter? Forgiveness? Understanding? Closure? Or perhaps just the reassurance that, despite everything, the bond they shared as children is not entirely lost. Sources indicate that Harry has spent countless hours pondering these questions, aware that the answers may not be immediate, and that the room he is about to enter will demand honesty he has long avoided. And then, the final approach. As the plane lands, the tension is palpable. Every mile closer is a countdown to a conversation that could redefine their relationship. Staff reports indicate that the moment of entry into the palace will be carefully orchestrated, ensuring privacy and security, yet leaving room for emotional truth. It is a journey with no guarantees. Reconciliation is possible, but so is heartbreak. And the first exchange, sources hint, will be electric, charged with a decade of unspoken emotion, anticipation, and fear. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. The moment Harry stepped through the palace doors, the air itself seemed to shift. Buckingham, Kensington, and all the grand halls that had once been silent witnesses to childhood games and adolescent arguments now became the stage for a reunion that the world had only imagined in whispers. The cameras were nowhere in sight. The press had no access. There were no advisors hovering with their usual mix of professionalism and anxiety. Just two brothers, alone, and a tension so thick it could be sliced with a knife. Sources describe the scene as surreal. The palace, usually bustling with staff, security, and ceremonial pageantry, had been stripped of distractions. The corridor Harry walked down was unusually quiet. Even the echoes of his own footsteps seemed amplified in the silence. Each step brought him closer to William, closer to the brother he had both loved and feared, closer to the confrontation that had been years in the making. Every heartbeat felt louder, every breath heavier, and every memory of their shared past surged forward unbidden. As Harry approached the designated room, the first challenge presented itself, the uncertainty. What would William say? Would he greet Harry with warmth or with guarded reserve? Would years of public tension translate into personal hostility, or would the private context allow for vulnerability, honesty, and the fragile beginnings of reconciliation? Sources suggest that even palace aides, who had orchestrated every logistical detail, were holding their collective breath, unsure how the first moments would unfold. The door opened, and there he was, William, stoic in public, but the sources reveal a subtle tremor of vulnerability in private. The weight of his diagnosis was visible, even if he tried to mask it. The man who had been seen by millions as composed and invulnerable now carried the unmistakable aura of someone grappling with the fragility of life, the pressures of legacy, and the complexity of brotherly estrangement. In that instant, the years of tension, the unspoken grievances, and the memories of shared loss collided. The first moments were awkward, almost painfully so. Observers report a measured silence, punctuated by cautious glances and hesitant gestures. Neither brother rushed forward. Neither spoke immediately. Instead, they allowed the weight of the moment to settle, a mutual acknowledgement of the magnitude of what was about to transpire. The silence was telling, loaded with unspoken words and years of suppressed emotion. For Harry, it was a test of courage. For William, a test of vulnerability. Sources indicate that Harry was the first to break the silence, offering a tentative gesture, perhaps a nod, perhaps a simple acknowledgement of presence. But even in this small act, the significance was enormous. It was a crack in the armor of distance, an opening for dialogue, a moment where past grievances could begin to be addressed. William responded in kind, the stoicism of years momentarily softened by recognition of shared history, shared pain, and shared responsibility. What followed, insiders report, was an intense emotional negotiation. Each word was weighed, each gesture analyzed. The conversation began cautiously, circling around the edges of deeper truths, testing the waters for honesty, and probing the limits of trust. Harry and William had both grown. Their lives had diverged dramatically since the last meaningful conversation. Yet beneath the layers of experience, titles, and public scrutiny, there remained a connection forged in childhood, a bond that even years of estrangement could not erase. The emotional beats of this reunion were unpredictable. Laughter occasionally punctuated the tension, memories of childhood antics breaking through the anxiety. There were pauses, long and loaded, where both men seemed to reflect on decades of miscommunication and public spectacle. Every word carried weight. Every gesture was charged with significance. And every revelation hinted at truths long buried beneath layers of duty, pride, and public expectation. The contrast between public and private personas became starkly evident. William, in public, is measured, cautious, composed. In private, he allowed moments of vulnerability, exposing fears and concerns that no camera would ever capture. Harry, conversely, who often navigates the world with bravado and directness, showed restraint and deliberation, mindful of the emotional fragility of the moment. Sources describe a dance of emotion and caution, where every step forward required care, and every gesture held the potential to heal or harm. As the conversation deepened, the weight of William's diagnosis became more palpable. It was no longer an abstract concern discussed in hushed whispers. It was a lived reality, a shared truth that demanded acknowledgement. The room, isolated from public view, became a crucible of emotion, where fear, hope, regret, and love intermingled. Harry and William were not merely brothers confronting personal issues. They were two men grappling with mortality, legacy, and the consequences of years of estrangement. And yet, even in these moments of intense emotion, there were moments of levity and humanity. Shared jokes, recalling private memories, and playful gestures reminded them of what they once were and what they could still be. Sources suggest that these moments, brief as they were, acted as bridges over the chasms of resentment, nostalgia, and grief. They were reminders that beneath titles, public scrutiny, and scandal, the fundamental bond of brotherhood remained intact. But the stakes could not be ignored. William's condition was serious, and the gravity of the situation added layers of urgency to their dialogue. Every pause, every question, every confession was amplified by the awareness that time was finite. The reunion was not only about reconciliation. It was about confronting truths that could no longer be postponed, about preparing for a future that was uncertain, and about acknowledging the fragility of life in a way that neither brother had fully done in years. And then, the sources hint at a pivotal moment. A statement, a confession, or a question from William changed the tone of the room. It was the kind of revelation that forces honesty, that strips away pretense, that brings buried emotions to the surface. It was a moment that challenged Harry to respond authentically, to balance vulnerability with strength, to confront both the past and the potential future. The sources remain vague about the exact words, but the intensity was unmistakable. The emotional tension is compounded by the broader context of the monarchy. This is not merely a private family matter. It is a moment with potential ramifications for the public perception of the royal family, succession, and the very narrative of duty and loyalty that the monarchy seeks to uphold. Observers suggest that the room, while isolated, carries with it the weight of history, expectation, and legacy. Every word spoken is imbued with significance, every gesture scrutinized, every silence pregnant with meaning. Finally, the chapter closes on the cliffhanger. Insiders reveal that just as the conversation seemed to reach a tentative equilibrium, an unexpected revelation from William shook the room. A statement that challenged Harry's assumptions, forced him to confront uncomfortable truths, and threatened to alter the fragile progress of reconciliation. The palace, the public, and even the brothers themselves had no way of anticipating the emotional impact of this moment. It was a pivot point, a juncture at which the past, present, and future collided in a way that would reverberate far beyond the walls of the room. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. The door closed behind them, sealing the room in silence. What lay beyond was no ordinary conversation. It was the reckoning of a decade, a collision of history, emotion, and unspoken truths that had festered in the shadows for far too long. Harry and William, once inseparable, now sat across from each other in a room charged with tension, fear, and the fragile possibility of reconciliation. Every glance, every sigh, every subtle shift in posture spoke volumes. The air was thick with anticipation, as though the room itself were holding its breath, waiting for the confessions to begin. Sources suggest that the first words from William were not casual greetings, nor carefully rehearsed statements. Instead, they were a blunt acknowledgment of the years of distance, of the misunderstandings that had widened the gap between them. It was a moment that stripped away the veneer of composure, exposing raw emotion beneath. "I didn't want it to come to this," William reportedly said. "I wanted more time. But the truth is, we've been avoiding each other for too long." Harry, who had anticipated some level of confrontation, felt the weight of the words immediately. The familiar sense of protection, the instinct to deflect, had no place here. And then the secrets began to surface. Not all at once, not like an explosive revelation designed for headlines, but in measured, deliberate layers. William spoke of his fears, his health, yes, but also the pressures he had borne as the future king, the burden of expectation, and the isolation that came with his role. Harry listened, silently at first, but the tension within him was palpable. He recognized the vulnerability in William's voice, a side of his brother the public had never seen, and it ignited a mix of empathy, guilt, and curiosity. For Harry, this was both an opportunity and a challenge. He had spent years away, navigating a life of independence, fame, and scrutiny, often at odds with the expectations of the royal institution. He had his own confessions, his own secrets, moments of regret, times he had questioned his decisions, and fears about how his actions had impacted William and the monarchy. The room became a space where both brothers could finally lay these truths bare, free from advisors, cameras, and public judgment. Sources report that the dialogue oscillated between the intensely personal and the surprisingly mundane, creating a rhythm that was almost hypnotic. They reminisced about childhood games, shared adventures, and memories that had once been a source of joy but now carried undertones of loss. Harry recalled moments when he felt overshadowed by William, moments of isolation, and times when he believed his brother did not understand him. William, in turn, admitted to moments of fear, insecurity, and frustration, both at Harry and at himself. The conversation quickly took on a confessional tone. Harry revealed feelings he had never expressed publicly. The sense of betrayal he felt over media manipulation, the frustration at being misunderstood, and the emotional toll of being distanced from his family, while simultaneously navigating life under the world's gaze. William responded with equal candor, admitting that he too had felt abandoned at times, misunderstood, and pressured by the weight of expectation. For a moment, the room became a shared space of vulnerability, where the past decades of silence and resentment were acknowledged without judgment. Yet, even in these moments of tentative honesty, tension remained. Sources indicate that the brothers occasionally paused, unsure how to navigate the minefield of unspoken grievances. The emotions were raw, unpredictable, and at times overwhelming. Every sentence had the potential to soothe or to wound. Every revelation demanded a measured response. And as they delved deeper into their personal histories, it became clear that some secrets were far more consequential than either had anticipated. Among these were admissions about personal fears and decisions that had shaped their lives. Harry reportedly shared the internal struggles he faced while distancing himself from royal life, detailing moments when he had felt trapped by tradition, misunderstood by advisors, and isolated from his family. William, in turn, admitted to decisions he had made in the absence of Harry, choices he had believed were necessary for the monarchy, but which may have deepened the rift between them. These revelations were not mere anecdotes. They were truths that reframed the narrative of their relationship, exposing layers of complexity previously hidden from the public eye. What makes this exchange remarkable, according to insiders, is the combination of raw honesty and emotional restraint. Neither brother sought to dominate the conversation. Neither attempted to cast blame without acknowledgement. Instead, the dialogue was characterized by a delicate balance of confession, apology, and empathy. Each statement was a building block, carefully placed, to reconstruct a bridge across a decade of silence. The stakes were heightened further by the knowledge of William's diagnosis. Sources describe moments when the gravity of his health became palpable, adding urgency to every word, every pause, every confession. The realization that time might be limited imbued the conversation with intensity, pushing both brothers to confront emotions they had long avoided. Harry reportedly expressed frustration, not at William personally, but at the circumstances that had forced their estrangement and the pressures that had kept them apart. William, in turn, acknowledged the same frustration, recognizing that both had suffered in their own ways. There were also unexpected moments of vulnerability that insiders say no one could have anticipated. William reportedly shared fears about legacy, responsibility, and the burden of expectation, admitting moments of doubt that had never been visible in public. Harry, known for his candidness, responded with empathy, expressing regret for actions or words that may have unintentionally caused hurt. The conversation became a delicate dance of emotion, where honesty was both a weapon and a balm, capable of wounding and healing simultaneously. Yet, even as truths were exchanged, the room remained charged with tension. The presence of long-held secrets, the fear of misinterpretation, and the weight of public perception created an undercurrent of uncertainty. Every word carried meaning, every gesture was significant, and every pause was laden with unspoken emotion. Observers describe it as a rare moment of unfiltered humanity, a space where privilege, duty, and scrutiny were stripped away, leaving two brothers to navigate the raw terrain of their shared past. And then came the pivotal moment, the turning point that insiders hint at but cannot fully disclose. A confession from William, something long held in private, pierced the emotional fabric of the room. It was not a dramatic declaration, nor a calculated reveal designed to shock. Instead, it was a deeply human moment. A truth that had been hidden from the world, from Harry, and perhaps even from himself, until now. This revelation, sources insist, changed the trajectory of the conversation, demanding a response, demanding understanding, and forcing both brothers to confront not only each other, but the broader implications of their relationship. As the chapter draws to a close, the emotional weight is nearly unbearable. The room is quiet, the air dense with anticipation. Harry and William sit across from each other, aware that what has been revealed may redefine not only their relationship, but also the course of the coming months. The secrets shared in these moments are more than confessions. They are catalysts, setting the stage for a reconciliation or a rupture that could have lasting consequences. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. The palace, usually a backdrop of serene routine and ceremonial pageantry, had transformed into a stage of unseen tension. Outside the private room where Harry and William confronted their decade-long estrangement, every hallway, corridor, and chamber pulsed with quiet anticipation. Staff members moved with hushed precision, aware that every detail of the day carried monumental significance. The world would never see this moment unfold, yet those inside the palace felt the full weight of history pressing down on them. Security protocols had been tightened to unprecedented levels. Sources describe a silent choreography, aides stationed discreetly along the route to the room, communications carefully monitored, doors double-checked to ensure that no uninvited presence would disturb the fragile reunion. Even minor movements were deliberate. Every creak of a floorboard, every shuffle of a shoe, every muted conversation could potentially ripple into the delicate emotional balance inside the room. The palace itself seemed to hold its breath, aware that history was being written in private. The staff were caught in a unique tension. On the one hand, they had spent years ensuring the smooth functioning of the royal household, trained to anticipate every eventuality and maintain strict decorum.